All right, welcome Scavengers to episode 18 of the Six Scale Scavengers podcast. My name is Brian Fontaine, joined as always by my good friend Chris Letty. And Chris, for the second episode in a row, we're going to a 3-person booth. Now, it is opening day in baseball this week across the United States, and we thought we'd liven the show up a little bit with a call up from I don't want to say the minor league because I'm a huge fan so far of Scavengers Assemble. But Chris, we've got Steve joining us today. So Steve, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. I hope you're okay with having a Yankee fan on the show.
Oh man.
You know what? Actually,
no,
it's fine, Steve. My grandfather growing up was a huge Yankees fan, and favorite player was Mickey Mantle, and that was his era. I always actually really enjoyed talking baseball with him, Steve, because obviously as a Red Sox fan and a Yankees fan, it was nice to have civil conversations. I know some of that in fandom, just like it is with nerddom and especially with Star Wars right now, but we'll keep it civil. Yankees fans are welcome here, just as any other baseball fans are.
Hey, it's always great to have competition. So as a Red Sox fan, I enjoy it when the Yankees are competitive. Anyway.
All right. So before we start getting complaints about talking about something other than collecting and hot toys here, Steve, you are, as I mentioned, the host of our Scavengers Assemble. We just had episode 3. Now this has been on YouTube since it's been launched. And for the first time with episode 3, we put it on the podcast feed, and a lot of people have been tuning in, so I'm glad to see that because I know you put a lot of hard work into that, and it's great to have our listeners be part of that rotating conversation. And, can sometimes talk about some similar things we do here on the podcast with Chris and myself, but it's great to get different opinions, and the show is, as I'm sure people have kind of figured out, it's a variety of different topics.
Yeah, we're trying to come up with a little different format than what you guys do on the podcast, right? Really, the Scavengers Assemble group chat is more of a, hey, it's a Friday night, let's get together, let's hang out, talk, maybe have a couple beers, and talk about our favorite pastime, six-scale scavenging.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been great so far. I love it's a little bit longer format, and the discussions go past 6-scale collecting. There's all sorts of stuff to talk about. It's great. And the guests we've had on so far have brought the conversation to another level, and we hope to get more people on.
Yeah, we play with the rules a little bit. I like to maybe talk a little bit about some other different types of collecting and movie reviews and things like that. So a lot of fun.
So Steve, I was going back through our admin report on our 6-scale scavenger collector group, and I want to say, I couldn't definitively say what listener number you were, but I think you were inside the top 10, and I think you actually hold the title for being the first person that joined that wasn't invited from Chris or myself. Because when you create something new, you're like, oh, friends and family, let's get all them in there. And
so I was the first interloper. All right, way to go.
And then, as you can see, the team has grown from there, and it's great. So if anybody hasn't checked it out yet, certainly YouTube is the best way to do it because you can watch the video live, and you'll get it a day or two before it actually hits the podcast RSS feed. So guys, enough about the introduction here. We've got a pretty fun episode planned here. Guys, we actually have some Hot Toys news. Now, it's not necessarily breaking news because Steve, you and the gang already talked about it on Friday night, but we'll give a little bit different spin on that. Chris and we have a collection update. Topic inspired from also another member of the team with Matt about going back and purchasing figures no longer at retail, and sometimes it being cost prohibitive or not. And our feature figure review of this episode is going to be done by Steve, and Chris and myself are going to be peppering you with questions, Steve, but we're going to be reviewing Hulkbuster 2.0 from Avengers Infinity War, Power Pose 005. Now, guys, very timely with a lot of this Endgame stuff finally coming out. We've got the trailer now. A couple of days ago, we got the rumored runtime. Now, 3 hours and 2 minutes.
Not long enough. Oh,
It's-
sorry.
Yeah, not long enough. The funny thing is nobody is saying, "Oh, that's too much movie." It's every conversation I've seen, guys, is, all right, is there going to be an intermission, and how am I going to time the bathroom break?
Don't drink all day.
That's what I do. I usually don't have anything to drink like several hours before a movie, and I just walk right past the concession stand every time. I'm like, I don't even want to be tempted by a beverage here because I don't want to have to leave the movie at all.
That's how it went for me with Captain Marvel. It was straight shot right through, but hopefully with Endgame, plan ahead, everybody, because you don't want to miss a minute of that movie.
Yeah, and we're actually, I looked at a countdown now. We're actually 30 days from the release of the movie, and I think we're starting to see Disney and Marvel kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit and showing us a little bit more about the film. There was a cool little featurette today. I don't think it had any new footage, but it had some quick little sound bites from Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and I think they're really hitting it home, guys, that, I mean, our heroes lost. They were devastated in Infinity War, and they're really focusing on those fallen heroes. And Chris, I was talking to you earlier today, and they also released all the photos, the headshots, and the heroes that made it unscathed, and then it was all the heroes that got snapped. And you said there was, what, 30 of those already kicking around?
I think it was around 30, 29 or 30. So, I mean, it was just, we got an image of pretty much every main character, the Avengers side, including characters such as Happy Hogan, Pepper Potts, Aunt May, I believe. And then we got some images of at least one character that we were unsure of as to what their
I
fate
see what
was.
you did there. I see what you
Yes.
did there.
Yes. So, what character might we be talking about?
It was Shuri. That was the one that surprised me. I was kind of hoping she made it through, but now we've got both her and Black Panther that are going to hopefully have to come back in some capacity. I really hope that she was around and was going to be a main part of the movie. But I don't know, Steve, any of that stuff catch your eye?
I didn't see those. I do recall seeing Shuri. I'm one of those guys that watches the YouTube videos that picks apart every single trailer, turn a 3-minute trailer into an hour analysis session. And somebody was looking at screens at the Toll of the Dead, and Shuri came up as missing ? Or something like that. So I'm not surprised. That sounds like she was one of the people snapped, huh?
Yeah, that's a bummer, but I don't know. It's just fun speculating about this movie at this point. And I mean, the Russo brothers have already come out and said that there's potentially some fake footage, just like there was for Infinity War. I think famously that shot of Hulk running with some of the other Avengers in Wakanda there, that obviously was not in the film. So we'll see. I mean, they're trying to get us excited for a movie without giving anything away, and their track record's pretty darn good.
Yeah, they're keeping things close to the chest, like you were talking about. As we lead up closer to the movie release date, we're definitely going to get more tidbits about what's going on, and people are really going to ramp up speculation and all that fun stuff that we do.
All right, guys, let's get into news. And I was getting a little worried when we starting to plan this episode about a week ago. There's a little bit of a dry spell, as we've talked about it, and we talked about it on Steve's Scavengers Assemble. Hot Toys is in fact not out of business. They are still in operation. They even gave us a new pre-order this week. So guys, flipping gears from Marvel, let's go over to Star Wars. And we've got a new figure in Qui-Gon Jinn from Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. As far as I know, this is not a figure that we were shown whatsoever up until this point.
Yeah, I don't think we get teased in the slightest, honestly, with all the promo images for other figures in that for Phantom Menace. But yeah, it's an awesome figure. I'm glad for all the Star Wars Hot Toys collectors out there. He's going to make a nice addition to anybody's collection for sure.
I think what this is telling us is they're really committing themselves to the prequel line ahead of I believe it's the 20-year anniversary. So hopefully this is really the start of many, many figures. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I think Obi-Wan from the Jedi Padawan is almost a certainty at this point. It'll be interesting to see if we get some version of Padme at some point. I think most people would say probably 1 and 2 as their choices would be. Probably number 1 for most people would be Attack of the Clones on Geonosis, and then probably number 2 would probably be her queen outfit from Phantom Menace, and or kind of the outfit she wears at the end of the film on the attack on Theed there. But this is very interesting. Now, I have to admit, this is not a day one pre-order for me, and because I've scaled Star Wars back and then Marvel has been filling up more of my collection, I feel like this is one I probably would have gotten under normal circumstances, but I'm kind of meeting that space quota. I know, Steve, you and I have been talking, and you've been really selling me the idea of not only getting 1 Billy cabinet, but potentially 2 Billy cabinets and doing a double wide or a double depth display, which would definitely solve some of the space issues I have. However, that being said, this is MMS 525 pre-order up on Sideshow now, $235, which I thought was actually a fairly good price given some of the other recent higher ones we've seen. This is projected to release January to March 2020. And according to my tracker spreadsheet, and it's by no means the absolute or 100% accurate, but I show this as the 110th Star Wars release. And obviously this will be now the 3rd figure from Star Wars The Phantom Menace, if we count the Darth Maul Standard Edition and then the Darth Maul with Speeder.
Wow, 110 so far. So many more possibilities for figures going forward. Yeah, I think
so. There's up to is probably more because I feel like I'm missing some on the Marvel side, but Marvel's at 204.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of dictated by the worldwide market and stuff. Marvel compared to Star Wars at this point, but. Yeah, I think Qui-Gon is a great choice, especially, we're talking about the 20th anniversary coming up. Perfect timing for this. And I wish Hot Toys did this more often, just dropping a figure out of nowhere that hasn't been hinted at all. It's a nice surprise, honestly. How about you, Steve? Is this one that you've got on order?
Well, I'm an unabashed lover of the prequels, and I can't wait for this. Give me Jedis, give me clones. Give me a series of Padmes in various gowns and haircuts from all the when she was the queen, when she was the handmaid, all the way through all the prequels. The more, the better for me. I absolutely love it. And if I run out of space, I'll just have to bring it into the bedroom. Or the kitchen or something. No excuses like Brian.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's like a combination of space and budget for the most part. But yeah, no, I'm with you there, Steve. And I think with that coming up, outside of until we really get a good sense of what episode 9 is going to look like, Chris, and I know you're getting ready to go to Star Wars Celebration in a few weeks, as are a couple of our listeners as well, that I feel like that's going to be some of our first glimpses of that. I think once we get those, I think Hot Toys then can give us potentially some early looks at some figures. But most of even the ones for Solo and The Last Jedi, they were really only released like a few months before the film actually came out, and then we had to wait a good length of time before they actually hit. So just because we're going to start getting some of those doesn't mean that those are going to be figures that are immediately going to be up for pre-order. I feel like the opposite of that's going to happen with Avengers Endgame. I feel like, and I won't rehash the conversation that was had on the Hangout this past episode, but a lot of those, there could be an embargo currently right now. And once that gets released, the floodgates are open. I mean, just talked about it, Chris, like 30 figures. They're not going to make 30 figures for this film, but a good chunk of those, they might make over half of those. And some of those characters might have multiple versions. It's just going to be pandemonium. But to Steve's point, I do feel like with the 20th anniversary coming up for Phantom Menace this May, that we're going to get a couple more figures from that. And as each of these films kind of hits that 20-year mark with Attack of the Clones and then Revenge of the Sith, that it's going to be more commonplace to get a lot more of those figures.
Absolutely. And, we can only speculate as to which figures, would be the best choices for this movie. Like you said, Queen Amidala would be absolutely epic. It's just, is that the first Padme figure that they bring out? You could have Palpatine. I don't know. Jar Jar, I think would be. I think we were talking about it on the Assemble episode the other night. Jar Jar would be a great figure, in my opinion. I mean, the detail that they could have, it would be unlike any other Star Wars character, that they've had out so far. Let's hope that is in the pipeline. All you Star Wars Hot Toys collectors, can get your wallets ready.
Yes, definitely. All right, other bit of news, and this is a very minor thing. And when this came out, I was like, I pray that this is not the only thing we have to talk about. But Chris, I'm going to throw this one over to you. I don't know why I'm throwing it to you, but you just seem like the most logical person to talk about this. But totally. The Spider-Punk figure that's coming out, they made a huge point of indicating that they're changing the shape of the guitar.
Yeah, it is very odd that was the way they put it out. It's like Spider-Punk is getting a new style guitar for his release. And they could have just made both of them. I mean, why not? It's just a different style guitar. The main body of the guitar on the original one, I think I was saying, it's like got more extreme lines on it. It was kind of Bon Jovi, kind of Eddie Van Halen kind of style guitar from the 80s. But the new one kind of looks like the spider on his chest. At least, that's kind of the vibe I get from it. But hey, whatever. It's cool, I guess. Not a figure I'm going for. But the funny thing is, like, our conversation went to a place where maybe nobody buys this figure, and then it's the figure that's so desirable, like the Shore Trooper.
I just don't see it happening.
No,
that was a little tongue in cheek for me, but you never know. There's stranger things have happened with Hot Toys releases. Yeah, and I don't think anybody from our group is getting this, and I have not seen anybody say that they're getting it on any of the other groups. Although, which is kind of bad. I do, and I can't remember which group I saw this in, but somebody had said that usually a good leading indicator for a figure selling well is if on all the other wholesale websites like Big Bad Toy Store and stuff where they also do pre-orders that aren't necessarily on Sideshow, if those are sold out in advance of a figure dropping, then it's a good sign that there's actually some demand there. Devil's advocate that I would play is maybe it's just not a popular figure and they didn't maybe necessarily ask for the same allotment they normally would for, say, like a Iron Man figure or a Luke Skywalker figure or Darth Vader, etc.
I also think it's a victim of bad timing. You look at all the other figures that are supposed to come out at the same time, and there's this logjam of figures coming out in the middle of the year, and people can't afford to buy every figure. They're going to have to make choices. And for me, he falls on the bottom of my list.
Yeah, and I definitely want to direct people to especially go watch the video segment. And Steve, you probably don't have the timestamps that handy, but I do know at one point that we did talk about, and you had up on your screen, a chart that you'd put together that kind of showed that logjam that's on the way. As early part of this year, figures have been kind of delayed, and then there hasn't been a whole lot of announcements and whatever. And then there's also a bunch of figures that probably should have already been released by now that haven't. It's just basically sending all those things left to right. And it's going to just, towards the end of this year, it's got to be really tough on collectors to kind of come up with the money to pay for a lot of this stuff if they didn't really budget accordingly. I know we talk oftentimes on this podcast about, budgeting and staying within your means and whatnot, but it's hard when there's that many figures coming at one time, especially some of them that were kind of unplanned, that not necessarily moving up, they're actually moving back.
Yeah, that's the conversation going on across the board. Just, how are these figure releases gonna going to play out as the year goes on? Are we going to get dumped on like crazy? I know, Steve, you talked about not being, the average collector is not going to be able to afford all those figures. They're going to have to make choices. I hope that's not the case, but as we talk in the collection update, I mean, there's definitely things that you can do to help minimize that impact. It's a tough one at this point. And only have been collecting for over a year, it's tough for me. I just go off of what everybody else is saying. Nick was saying how it's kind of par for the course, but it's a little bit more extreme than previous years. So yeah, I guess we just see how things roll throughout the year.
If you believe the schedule that Sideshow has for their figure releases, it should work out to about 6 figures per month between DC, Marvel, and Star Wars for the next 6 months. And you're right, people are going to have to make choices. And I think that one way you could handle it is by looking at those and then taking a guess at what are going to be the less popular figures, and maybe just waiting. Imagine, you wait until till your wallet recovers and a lull happens, and you take when that lull happens, say a year from now, the next winter, like it's happening right now, that's when you get a chance to go back and catch up on some of those figures that you had to pass up on at the time.
Right. And maybe at that time, Sideshow is doing another one of their holiday kind of giveaway or rewards points giveaway / free shipping deals, or, whatever. Or you might have more rewards built up by then. We've talked about it in the past that it's that taking the chance of waiting on a figure. We've seen a lot of these figures have been sitting on Sideshow for a long time, and they've got them in stock. A lot of the other retailers have a lot of these current figures in stock. Yeah, I think waiting may be a really good option at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, for example, like right now, everybody will probably laugh at this, but I'm probably adding a Shuri back in after I canceled my pre-order. But that's one figure that I feel like I'm going to take the chance and see after it releases. It's not one I necessarily have to have in hand as soon as it releases, but I also think that one could be one of those ones that is kind of like Black Widow that's been hanging around, is probably going to end up as one that'll be free shipping. And it's not because I don't think the figure is going to be good. I just think that it's also going to be, as Steve alluded to, it's going to be releasing right in that glut of so many other things coming out that it could sit there for a little bit. So instead of locking up another non-refundable deposit or tying up budget money kind of in the meantime, Chris, it might make sense to kind of wait till the fall for that one. And maybe, usually once or twice per year, Sideshow will slap those $20 off stickers onto some figures that they release. Probably is a little sacrilegious, Steve, to kind of damage the shipper boxes, but
oh man,
there's an inside joke there somewhere, folks.
I think some of the other figures that might fall into that category of maybe I can wait are the Stormtrooper that's supposed to be coming out soon. I think perhaps R2-D2, the Iron Man figure that they're doing the re-release on. I basically, my strategy here is think about all the figures where they're essentially, people already have a lot of them. A lot of people have R2-D2. A lot of people have this Iron Man already. A lot of people have Stormtrooper. Maybe they won't go as fast, and maybe that can be, you can wait on that.
Definitely something to see if it's advantageous or not. This is one thing that I didn't know if I wanted to include or not, but I feel like sometimes doing like a PSA, public service announcement, can really help people out. Now, we had Scott in our group post a message last night saying that he had just got off the phone with Sideshow customer service, and he had pre-orders set up for a Doctor Strange and a Thanos that were set to final payment, but they weren't being sent, and he'd got notification that they technically had them. So they couldn't really explain why they hadn't been sent, but they did send them out, and it looks like he got them this evening. So talk about 1 day shipping. I'm not sure where he's located, but it's something to kind of keep in mind. I know I don't want to go rehash that whole discussion we had about Sideshow and their website being updated, but maybe there's still a couple uncovered bugs they might be having in their website. Because Chris, that's one thing that we've talked about in the past, especially you and I are big fans of doing the payment plans and extending them out as long as possible, just to kind of ease the burden of the payment sometimes, is once you've made that second to last payment there and you got one left, is actually then taking it off the payment plan, putting it on a final payment. But now I'm a little worried by doing that it could just be kind of sitting there in no man's land. And I hope that now Sideshow is aware of this, they're going to fix it, but it's a little unnerving.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by that situation. There just seems to be some quirky little things going on right now. Again, if you guys want to hear a deeper discussion on it, check out Scavengers episode 3. But yeah, we were just talking about Sideshow potentially not getting different allotments of figures, and then they get them in, and then they just want to send them out in batches. They don't want to send one out here, send one out there. For whatever reason, things have been a little bit off as far as shipping those figures out that they have in stock. I don't know. It's just another kind of this whole weird time right now. I don't know what's going on.
I'm scratching my head here. I have Thanos on order. I'm paying in one payment at the end. I imagine a lot of people are. I can't imagine Sideshow is sitting on a glut of inventory of Thanos's and not sending them out. It's an interesting experience that Scott had, and I think I might be giving Sideshow a call here pretty soon, just in case, because I would hate to wait unnecessarily. I really need that adorable purple guy in my cabinet here.
You need Grimace in there.
Grimace.
Heck yeah.
I need me some Grimace.
Tony Stark's got so many good one-liners in that film. All right, so I was also, as Scott had me looking at the website. It did happen, I noticed too, and Chris and I will every few episodes kind of give an update on things that at least I've noticed that have gone waitlisted since the last time I looked for waitlisted things. Chris, I feel like we mentioned the standard edition Palpatine as being one of those figures that had previously already been on a wait list. I know the other ones on the Star Wars side is one of the Praetorian Guards, and Hoth Leia still is. But I did notice that they added the standard edition Boba Fett from Empire that was on there now too.
Yeah, I mean that guy sat on there for a while, but I guess they finally sold out for the most part. For me, I've seen the deluxe one in person, and it's a pretty cool figure, but I know a lot of hardcore Boba Fett fans will beg to differ on accuracy and that sort of thing. But hey, it's good to see these figures get sold out. There's a lot more that need to be sold on there. But yeah, I mean, I like Boba Fett. He would be one that I would probably have in my collection if I collected Star Wars figures.
Do it.
Yeah, I know, right? It's so tempting. Matt's giving me all kinds of crap. How do you do it when you collect Star Wars stuff and you don't collect Star Wars Hot Toys? I'm like, I gotta pick and choose, man. Can't buy it all.
All right, so let's go over to the collection update, Chris. And you and I were both fairly busy. You don't have a ton of huge things, but it's still good to have some new additions coming into the collection.
Yeah, we got that infamous eBay coupon that we have been waiting months and months for. We got it a couple weeks back. 15% off entire purchase, your cart. I didn't have any big purchases lined up. I wasn't really watching too much stuff, but I decided to jump on a couple projects. I got the Super MC Toys Nano Combat Jacket Suit set for Tony Stark. So I get that for a good price. Been wanting that. That's one I'm going to put aside. I'll tackle that down the road. I've got several Tony Stark head sculpts to work with. I know, Steve, you've put one together, and several other members have put them together. So I got to find the right body combination for that guy. Looks pretty cool. Quality material. I definitely recommend it. And I also got the came out a few years ago, Super MC Toys Black Widow clothing stealth set. It is for Civil War. It's got like her beige jacket with her high boots, black pants. Again, another project for down the line. I can't remember which Instagrammer it was, but he posted a really cool set of images with these Super MC Toys outfits set up next to a full figure set up next to the Hot Toys counterpart, and it was a really cool juxtaposition of the from one style to the next. So that kind of inspired me to go after that. I know Roy got a number of those other suits for the Civil War characters. And then another fun little one I was just perusing the options on eBay, and Chris Marino was telling me, hey man, there's all kinds of cool little accessories that you can get for these figures and comic books in 1/6 scale. And then I found this neat Deadpool kind of package from Deadpool 1. It's got like the People magazine with Ryan Reynolds on the cover, Hugh Jackman. It's got a Wham record. It's got a Green Lantern little baseball card. It's got a picture of him and Vanessa, his drawings when he's on the bridge, listening to Salt and Pepper there. So it's just a fun little set. So I can, do some fun things on, when I get the display set up. But yeah, there's all kinds of neat things like that. I love that stuff. I mean, Bryan hates it. He just sells it all, but I love it.
That's, Chris, I'm listening to you and I'm doing some mental math here. And I'm thinking that's a couple of Star Wars Hot Toys figures right there. You could be doing it.
Well, I mean, if I get the bodies and the head, yeah. Oh, I gotta find a Natasha or a Black Widow head sculpt. But I've been looking. There's some used bodies on eBay, but yeah, again,
don't take that out of context.
Yeah, I got to watch what I'm searching for while the wife's around.
You know who doesn't have that problem? Me.
Yeah, I know. You just avoid it altogether. These other guys I'm falling into the peer pressure for all this stuff. So, but yeah, so I don't know. It's just some fun things, projects down the road. I'll just add it to my list of all the non-Hot Toys Kit Bash figures that I'm trying to put together. So, and then one other thing, we kind of alluded to it, the whole payment plan situation on Sideshow. So I had 4 figures as one-time payments, and because of the delays and everything, I decided to just say screw it. I'm going to switch all the rest of my pre-ordered figures to payment plans, extend them out. So yeah, I switched Thanos, Mark 50, Black Panther, and Shuri all to payment plans. And so the reason for that, and my co-host kind of, encouraged me to do so, and was to save some money in case they dropped before or right around Celebration. But I neglected to look at the date when the payments were going to drop, and it was the next day. So I had 4 figure payments drop on the same day. So it kind of backfired, but I think in the long run it'll work out. But anyway, check the dates on the payment plans there. And I'm not quite as planned out or detail oriented with my budget as these other 2 guys are, with their graphs and their charts and their to the cent. I'm not quite that detail oriented.
Well, I tell you, I wasn't doing budget until Bryan suggested it to me, and about 3 months ago I started. And part of the reason why I was busting your chops there about those figures equaling up to a couple of Star Wars Hot Toys is when you start tracking the $30 here, the $60 there, and whatnot that you're spending, you start realizing, well, I'm spending a little bit more than I originally thought. And, maybe you spend some time working on your budget just for 1 month. You start seeing where the money is going. Maybe you'll find out, well, maybe I can afford that Qui-Gon Jinn after all. I mean, what would you rather have? A couple of kit bashes or Qui-Gon Jinn?
I know. That is an argument I'm probably going to lose 9 times out of 10. It's kind of the way things go for me collecting wise. That's why I started out collecting all the secondary characters for the Marvel line. And then I'm like, shoot, I don't even have a Captain America or a Iron Man. I'm like, I got, 20 secondary characters. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's something I've got to work on.
Well, good updates, Chris. I have been busy myself. Now, as Roy was busting my chops for Out Star Wars Goes, In Marvel Comes, so I sold 3 Star Wars figures since our last episode. Now, I let and you call this one, Chris, I'm going to give you credit where credit's due, but I did let my Jyn Erso Deluxe go. Now, thankfully, it's in a situation where I still have visitation rights, as if I need them, that I can make a 6 or 7 hour drive over to the state of Pennsylvania and visit my good friend Mark and see that, in addition to some of my other Star Wars figures there. But I'm so glad it's got a good home, and I know Mark's been looking for one of those for quite a while. Mark's getting his collection going, and he's got a good start. Like I got to say, I had some good figures there.
Brian K2 says hello, just by the way.
Yeah, that's what I figured. We don't have the video going for this, but now I figure every time I see him there, I weep a little bit. Now, a couple other ones I sold, and I went the eBay route for these. Now, a couple episodes ago, I talked about parting out parts of figures, and Steve, you and I talked offline at one point of like, what would happen if you end up selling one of those figures that you let some parts go of it. Now, Anakin from Revenge of the Sith with one of those figures, and I can't remember exactly what it sold for, but it obviously was far less than it's going for a lot of groups. But I had to factor in that the Count Dooku lightsaber went for a good amount of money separately, and I had sold his brown Jedi cloak separately at one point. So putting that all together, it basically netted what it would have been, maybe a little bit less if I just sold the whole figure entirely. But I mean, it's still available on retail for Sideshow. That's going to suppress the secondary market quite a bit for anybody that is actually paying attention. And it was just more of a space issue, not necessarily a budget. And then the other one I looked at and kind of realized I don't necessarily need to have 2 BB-8s, as I let the BB-8 go from The Last Jedi. Now, that one actually went for a decent amount, but again, that's another figure that's available on Sideshow. When you sell a figure on a secondary market and it's still available at retail price, going into it, you are not getting what you paid for it. But would you rather have, a little bit of money back for it to use to something else, or would you like it just kind of taking up space? That's in my situation, Steve, is very valuable. I only have 4 cases currently, and hopefully I'll work on my project will be trying to expand my display space, not necessarily getting Kit Bash figures.
You're not much into those long-term commitments with your figures, are you? I would hate to be like a high school girlfriend of yours. Dating for 2 weeks. I love you. I'm sorry, I gotta go.
This voted off D-Top Island.
They're not even sold out of Sideshow already, and you're selling them. You crazy guy.
But I love it. And I also, as I told somebody else, something else I bought recently. I hate money. So those are figures sold. Now, I did sell, as you guys were busting for me for also selling accessories, but I've sold 3 accessories since the last episode as well. Now, one of these came in with the Doctor Strange. I think I mentioned last episode that I had on the way, but didn't have it in hand yet. Do have that in hand. So I have the Doctor Strange MMS 387 from his solo film. And I literally missed that eBay coupon by 1 day, but I got a really good price on it, and it was practically new. For some reason, the person just displayed it with just the figure, but left all the accessories still in the box. And I looked at it, and Chris, you'd laugh at this, but I looked at it. I'm like, man, the Book of Cagliostro looks pretty cool. but I would never display it. I would never have him holding the book, just kind of perusing it. And I'm not going to make like a bookshelf in there. And I'm not going to just have it sit at his feet. So I'm like, all right, well, it's going for a decent amount on eBay. Let's just put it on there and see what happens. And it went for far less than a lot of the buy it now ones go. But for what it is and what it was, I'll gladly take what it went for. And I think it actually went to one of the people, one of the listeners in our groups. That's really even cool that happened, even though it was through eBay. And then I also let a Ant-Man head sculpt go from the Civil War figure that I recently picked up. That one literally just sold as we're talking here. And I also let the Captain America Steve Rogers head sculpt go from Avengers Age of Ultron, just because I have another one from Civil War, and I actually prefer that figure with the helmeted version versus the non one. I also feel like too, some of the Steve Rogers head sculpts, the neck tended to be a little long. So other than that, I'm kind of pleased with that. And for me, I kind of take the opposite stance with those. Is if I'm not going to display it and it's sitting in a container in my collecting space, where I have all the stuff stored away, and I know it's something that would be of value, I'd rather turn that into money that I could spend on another figure.
Totally makes sense. I mean, I get where you're coming at, and it's very tempting to do so, especially seeing the success that you've had selling off some of these figures. I mean, I kind of relate it to the vintage Star Wars figures. I've got accessories. I've got a bin full of accessories, and I could complete figures, but the accessories themselves are actually, you get more for them when you sell them by themselves. If you sell them with a figure, you're basically giving the figure away for free with a lot of the more common figures. So it's very tempting to just sell off, those accessories by themselves to help fund, other parts of the collection. So yeah, as much as grief as I give you, I think once I get things all settled in and, someday in the hopefully near future, the display set up, I'll probably venture into that parting out realm that you've been dabbling in. So yeah, great stuff, man. Glad you're getting some money back there.
Hey, if it's not tied down or bolted down, it's potentially out the door. So
I think we're going to start calling you the Marie Kondo of 6-scale scavenging.
Doesn't bring me joy. It's gone.
Yeah.
But I did add a couple figures. So I did mention the Doctor Strange figure. Actually, this past weekend, I actually had the chance to finally unbox that, and then I got both the Falcon figures, the one from Civil War and then the one from the Winter Soldier.
So you got to explain that. You got to explain that, Brian. Why do you need 2 Falcons?
I just love the character, and I want to be able to display it when I get this Billy set up that you're going to help me figure out how I'm gonna work it. Right. Having both of them kind of flying. Obviously, I'm a huge Captain America fan, but I also love both of those movies independently, and then I also just love the character Falcon. And the Civil War version obviously is the superior figure, and that was one that I used my eBay coupon on. So that finally came in between the last episode, and I found a really good price on the one from Winter Soldier, and and also I hate money.
Enter meme of child throwing money out the window.
Or why not both? But no, I want to come up with a really cool display with that, and it's definitely a cool character. And Chris and I have talked about it a lot too, and I feel like we talked about it on a couple of the hangouts. It's like, I don't really think we're gonna get at this point. We're definitely not getting one from Infinity War. We're not getting any more figures from Infinity War. It's going to be Endgame or nothing, which is kind of a shame, because there's as we've talked about that figure, we talked about Scarlet Witch, and then also like say a character like Vision. Either you have to go back and get the prior releases for those, or hope that it will be released, or as we get some of this Disney Plus stuff coming up, maybe that's another avenue to explore, another version of that character. No, that's my update for a while. No new pre-orders or anything. Very patiently waiting with my budget projected through next April to figure out which one of these Endgame figures I'll be able to get once they start dropping them.
Yes, join the club. We're all going to be doing some planning here coming up. So speaking about going the opposite direction, as opposed to figures coming out, our topic is talking about entry points into collecting and how do we go about going after previously released figures. What are our thoughts on this topic that our good friend Matt threw out there for us?
Yeah, this kind of originated from some talk in our private group on Facebook about going back, and there's a lot of love, as understandably there should be, for the Rogue One line. It's, Steve, use your words, it's very robust. I think there's 14 figures that have been released. And for a lot of collectors that are now jumping in, we get new listeners all the time, new people that are just starting their collections. And sometimes it can be a little disheartening when you, shameless plug alert, but if you go to check our checklist on sixscalescavengers.com and you're going through and you're trying to find, oh, I really love this character, or, oh, I really love Rogue One, and you want to go back and you look at some of the figures, and then you're quickly dismayed to know, well, they're not available anymore. They were released in 2016, 2017. Oh, I'll go look at the secondary market. Like, holy smokes, it's like double what it was for retail. It's like, at what point is it prohibitive or not to chase them down or not? And I think that's all one thing that I know the three of us have all struggled with, continue to struggle with. It's like, I know that's one figure. I know, Steve, you and I have been on the lookout for a while. You just recently acquired a Falcon as well. And it's at what point is it okay? Because you still know, like, oh, I'm paying more than it was for retail.
Yeah, I think you need to be very strategic about doing that, because you can get out of control real quickly, and then you wind up having one or two figures from every movie. I tend to just try to focus on one or two movies because I didn't start collecting until very late in the game. After Rogue One came out, I was able to get the Jinn Urso from Sideshow, but that was it. Every figure in that line is the home run. So you got to expect to pay more, but you can't pay out the nose. If you go on eBay and you just buy whatever Shore Trooper, for example, is there, you're going to wind up spending $500-$600 on that Shore Trooper. You need to be patient. You need to have connections. For example, Facebook group like Six Scale Scavengers, telling people that, hey, I'm looking for this figure. People are keeping their eyes open for you, and suddenly there's a deal available. Or you have a friend in another country, like in my case, Roy helped me out. Roy kept an eye on the market out there and found something low and sent it to me. I was able to get it for a good price. You got to have patience. You just can't wake up one day and say, I want all the figures in Rogue One. I'm going to go buy them all now. It's going to take you a while to catch up. If you like money, I know not all of us like money, but yeah, you need to be patient. I create a list. I say, here are the figures I'm looking for, and I go and I research the prices, and I look for the absolute lowest price that they've sold on eBay over the past 3 months, and I set that as my target price. I'm going to pay the lowest price paid on eBay in the last 3 months, and I don't buy it until I find that price. Usually it winds up from a friend or something on Facebook.
Yeah, I wish I had your negotiating skills, Steve, because I've talked to you before, and you're like, I think you're getting a good deal, and you're like, oh yeah, I talked him down. I don't. I'll let you share one of the tactics that you use. I don't want to, steal any of your thunder, but I know you have one approach that works particularly well, especially when you're buying on a Facebook group.
Right. So when somebody is selling a figure, when I list figures, I'm assuming that somebody's going to talk me down. No matter what. I go into selling figures assuming that I'm going to wind up negotiating. And so I kind of look at other people's prices and I say, that person is probably negotiating. If you see somebody list a figure for $325, why do you think they listed it for $325? Because they want to get $300 out of it. All right. So I want to get that figure. So I'll reach out to the person and say, hey, look, I'm really interested in this figure. I just don't have the money to spend that much on it right now. Would you take $290? Okay. Now I offer $290 because I'm expecting that guy to come back and want to not give in to me completely right away. I want him to win a little bit. And so I'm going to leave a little meat there for the guy to come back and say, how about $300? Okay. And he says $300, and boom, we've made it there. Everybody's happy. Everybody felt like they won in the negotiation. Everybody can move on. Occasionally, you offer $290 or whatever, and they say yes. And great, bingo, good for you. In my mind, you got to figure that they're asking a little bit more than they really want. And so you try to find that sweet spot where you can let them get to what they really want while you're still selling it. You're still buying it at a price that you're happy with.
I gotta learn that.
Yeah, it's a great strategy. It is tough. I'm very non-confrontational, so like my negotiating skills are pretty weak, but I do.
Just don't overpay, Chris. Like, hey, I see you're offering it. Hey, would you take $345 for this?
Dang it! That's why I get screwed on everyone. No, I'm just kidding.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be confrontational. I mean, you can say things as simple as, "Hey, look, let's say you want to give them a very low price. Let's say that they're asking for $360, and you don't want to spend more than $300. You can say things like, look, if I can only afford $300 for this figure, I really would like to get this figure, but I can only afford $300. I recognize that's significantly lower than the price that you're asking for. And if you say no, that's okay. I have no problem with you saying no, but I just figured I'd put that out there in case you're interested." That's not confrontational. It tells them right away that go ahead and say no. It also tells them that you're willing to walk away. And it kind of puts them on the spot to say, oh, well, this guy, he's not desperate for the figure. Maybe I should give him the price that he's asking for. And it's not I understand that it's hard, but I tell you, once you start doing it, it becomes easier and easier. And then your family starts looking at you like, Dad, you can't negotiate the gallon of milk at Safeway or the supermarket. You need to stop doing that, Dad. It gets to that point.
Stop embarrassing me, Dad. Yeah, my son's 7. Those talks are happening soon. He thinks they won't ever happen, and I'm like, just wait. You're gonna think I'm uncool.
and teach your son how to do it. I teach my kids all the time, and what I'll often do is after I negotiate in front of them, I'll pull them aside and I say, "What just happened there?" And we'll actually do kind of like a post-mortem discussing why I offered what I offered and why he countered and how that conversation went. Because I grew up afraid of confrontation, afraid of having those negotiations. And it wasn't until I was well into my 30s that I learned how to do it. I'd like my kids to be able to do it as teenagers.
That's a great life lesson. Absolutely.
Get the life lessons out of a collecting talk. This is 2-for-1 podcast. We gotta have Steve back more often.
So
costing up the joint.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of going back to offering, not necessarily, a total lowball offer, but last year when I first started, that's kind of the game I was playing on eBay. So I was looking at all the figures that I was interested in, and I would just look for sales that had best offer. And I was dropping total lowball offers left and right. And just like, it's a figure that I want, but I'm not going to go higher than that. And this was before Infinity War came out. And I got so many good deals last year before Infinity War. I mean, I think I paid under $200 for at least 7 or 8 figures that I got last year, including Vision. I think I got Vision for like $160, Age of Ultron, Hawkeye for like $160. Let's see, I got Guardians of the Galaxy 1 Groot for like $140. So like a lot of really good deals that just, that's all shipped too. It's definitely worth it. That's kind of my strategy on eBay. I look for a lot of the auctions that have best offer, and I'll just drop a lowball offer to see if they bite on it. If they counter, a lot of the time they just get declined right away. But there's so many of these figures that there's bound to be another one that comes up. So I do recommend at least doing that if there's a number of figures listed that you do want, because you just never know. I had a couple that the people just accepted it right away. Like you're saying, Steve, I mean, it's worth a shot to get a figure at a good price if it's the right figure, condition wise and all that stuff and you have the funds to do so. I mean, I wouldn't, I wouldn't be dropping all those offers if I didn't have things lined up. But yeah, I mean, it's part of this whole buying experience. Hot Toys is really an area of collecting where there's enough product out there that you can be choosy with this stuff. Don't go for that $1,000, whatever figure. There's more out there.
Yeah, we could keep talking about this for a bunch of time, and I know we'll revisit this at some point, but I think everybody here had some really good points. I mean, patience, number one, be willing to negotiate. And then, kind of what you just said there, Chris, too, kind of picking back off what Steve said is having a list and knowing what your target price is, but then also staying within your means. It can get you can get caught up in the moment. You go back through and you do like a Star Wars rewatch, or you go back and do what some of us have done recently, and you go back through and you rewatch all the MCU films, and you're like, oh, man, I don't have that figure, but I just watched, say Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and I really want that figure, and they're not at retail anymore.
So one of the things that the list does for you, I'll just add this last little bit. I mean, aside from helping you to focus on what you want, there's an old figure of speech: fortune favors the prepared mind, right? If you know that you're willing to spend $200 on a Vision figure, if that $200 deal pops up on Facebook, a lot of people are going to want to jump at that fast. Facebook can be cutthroat when it's a good deal. You have to know your price. You have to have written it down. You have to remember it, and you have to jump on it immediately. Having that list allows you to do that. If you sit back and you think about it for a little while, and then if you reach out to the guy and you say, hey, I'm interested, blah, 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 and you don't immediately say, hey, I want to buy it, because it's the right price. What I usually say is, hey, I'd like to buy your figure. Are there any condition issues? I'm trying to establish the fact that I got money. I'm ready to do it. Tell me if there are any issues. But I can do that because I know my price. If I don't know my price, then what am I doing? I'm going and I'm doing a search on eBay. Well, while I'm searching on eBay, somebody's buying that figure.
Yeah, well said, Steve. And I think that happens for me with knowing I saw Captain America, the battling version, show up. And within seconds, I knew that the guy was offering a really good price. I didn't have to go look. Mm-hmm. Sometimes just knowing what those are, not like we sit around all day just studying prices and stuff, but I think in general, if something's, I think if you can instantaneously look at something and say, that's a good deal or that's a ripoff, then you can make those quick things. But sometimes some people just price things way too aggressive. Like somebody posted a lot, I want to say on 16 Republic about a month or so ago, and they listed about 20 figures, and the guy priced everything like, I'd say like $50 below what I would have expected. And one of the figures that popped out was the Doctor Strange figure. I think he listed it shipped and in really good condition for like $235. Now, wow. I did what you did. I said, hey, I want to buy your figure. But what I made the mistake of was commenting saying, interested, and then sent the guy a private message. But apparently people did the private message first, and he had more people in line. I don't even know what number I was, but he messaged me afterwards, like 30 minutes later. He's like, sorry, it's sold. Like, yeah. I didn't even get a chance to have a conversation. My message to him was like, I want this figure. What's your PayPal? Like, sometimes you just have to know if something is so good to be true, you gotta just jump right at it.
The thing with that is, these guys, usually they honor first come, first served, right? So how do you get yourself on the front of that line? And the way you do it is not by saying, hey, I'm going to PM you. The way you do it is you PM them, and then you go back and say, I just PM'd you.
Yep.
The way to do it is to say, I'm ready to buy it right now, and then ask your question about condition. Don't ask the question about condition and then offer. You want to get to the front of the line. The only way to get to the front of the line is to PM them first and say, I want to buy it.
Very sound advice. And like I said, I know will be a topic that gets revisited. I'd love to bat this topic around a Scavengers Assemble too, and get more of a panel talk about that, because I think everybody's got a lot of good tips and life experience and whatnot to share with that as well. We can't all be as good a negotiators as you are, Steve. Speaking of negotiating, Chris, I think let's see if we can convince Steve to give us the feature figure review. We're at that time of the episode. Chris, this is a figure you and I both do not have in hand, but Steve has in hand. And we're going to have the opportunity to ask him some of our questions that we think our listeners might want to know and see if this is a figure that they are going to ultimately want to be able to pick up. So, got the stats here, Chris. Get ready. So, we're talking about Hulkbuster 2.0 from Avengers Infinity War, PPS 005, Power Pose number 5, retailing for $430. By my estimation, it looks like this went up for pre-order April 27th, 2018, and had a Hong Kong release of February 13th, 2019. So about 10 months or so. Now, Steve, when did you get this shipped to you? It was a few weeks ago, correct?
Yeah, I think it's probably 3 weeks ago now.
Yep. So, I mean, a pretty quick from, we talk about like kind of the delay between Hong Kong and Sideshow. This one had a relatively shorter ramp up than some of the other ones that, not that I'm bitter that Black Panther hasn't come out very readily available in the United States yet, but let's get into this. So, Steve, overall thoughts about the figure, and then we'll kind of ask you about, I mean, obviously there's not going to be a ton of accessories or whatnot with this, but then we'll kind of just go through some of the features of the figure.
Right. Well, I was thinking about this, and I kind of consolidated my thoughts into a list of pros and cons, and I'll just start going through them, and you guys just interrupt me whenever you have a question. The main reason why I got this figure is because I think that he is absolutely essential if you are doing an Infinity War collection. If you're going to have 10, 15 Infinity War figures out there in your display, not having the Hulkbuster looming in the background, kind of everybody surrounding him, your collection's missing something. And I looked at that and I said, I think that he's absolutely essential. And I don't think we're ever going to get another chance at this Infinity War Hulkbuster armor. When you think about it, I don't think they're going to do a diecast. I don't think we're going to see it again in another movie or anything like that. So this is our chance right here. So that's why I got it. One of the great things about this figure is that the batteries are not like the other figures where you have to open up a half dozen compartments and you got these little button batteries and then there's a hidden switch and all that stuff. You got one easy to access compartment in the back with 3 AAA batteries and one switch. You flip that, boom, the thing lights up like a Christmas tree. No problem at all. That is such a huge improvement over all the other light up figures that Hot Toys has done. And then the other major benefit that this figure has is the price. Not everybody can afford to spend, I think it's $11.30 or 11 something for the Age of Ultron Hulkbuster. But maybe you want a Hulkbuster to go in with your 6 scale figures. Well, at about, a little bit over 1/3 the price, it's more of a attainable figure for many people than the $1,000+ price of the diecast one. But that's about it for the pros.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta ask you, Steve, about the height. So obviously it's listed on the Sideshow site as 50 centimeters tall, which basically equates to just under 20 inches. As you said, it does tower. I don't think it's quite as tall as the Mark 44, which is the original Hulkbuster. I think that one's 28 inches tall. I know it's a little bit taller than that one.
Yeah, part of the reason would be that this one is in a power pose, and so its knees are bent, and it's maybe just a little bit hunched over. So you're going to lose a little height that way. If you guys have like Gladiator Hulk, this guy is, if Gladiator Hulk is wearing his helmet with the little feathers on the top, Hulkbuster is maybe a 1/2 inch to 1 inch taller than the tip of the feathers on the Gladiator Hulk.
Oh wow, yeah, it's still huge.
Yes, it's enormous. Mm-hmm.
How about the weight of it?
The weight is much less. I had the diecast one. That thing was a beast to the point where I was not going to put him on any glass shelving. So this guy is. I don't know. I would hazard to guess. Let's see. I'm picking it up. I'd say probably 4 or 5 pounds. I don't know. You'd have to look up the specs, but nowhere near as heavy as the diecast one.
So almost like the weight of a standard Iron Man diecast figure, then.
Yeah. Well, yeah, probably. sometimes you get thrown off by the different sizes. Something feels a lot heavier than because it's in a smaller size. I'd have to look it up.
All right. So inevitably, Steve, there's going to be, as you mentioned, there's some cons.
Yeah.
With a limited figure. I mean, we're talking limited articulation. It is a power pose. We haven't talked a lot about the power poses in the past. Most of them have been Iron Man figures. I think they've done the Mark 40. I think they did the Mark 42. I want to say they've done the Mark 46 and 47. So obviously there's a few other power poses in there mixed in, but it is limited. I mean, but it makes it a little bit more cost effective as well.
Yeah. I'm not going to say that the fact that you can't articulate it is a negative. You're buying this knowing that it's a power pose. That is what it is. So you really can't hold that against them for selling you exactly what they set out to do, right? But you can criticize the pose itself. So my biggest issue with the pose is that the head is tilted to the right. And so then when you swivel the head, it's always on a permanent tilted axis. And it biases the figure in one direction, and that may not work with all displays. And so I wish they had gone with a neutral head with this one, and had the bent elbows and legs and all that stuff. That's fine, but the head should have been neutral. Instead, it's tilted to the side, and that really limits its display in some cases. The figure is made out of vinyl. We've been saying it's a much lighter, and a vinyl figure does have some negatives. So, for example, when you look at this figure, all the edges are much thicker than they were on the other Hulkbuster, and than they are on, say, a die-cast Iron Man. The edges are thicker and they're rounder. And when you have, a figure like this with wide, thick edges all over it, it starts to look more like a toy than a high-end collectible. The other thing that I don't know, I know what the mystery is, but the other thing that vinyl does is it does something to the paint job. You don't quite get the gloss feel that you would with a die-cast figure on a vinyl figure. And so everything has more of a matte look to it. And then on top of that, they made a very odd choice with their paint in that instead of doing a shiny silver across the figure, they went with a very dark gray accenting the figure. Now, today I went back to the movie and I played the movie back. I wanted to see, hey, was that gray or not? And no, it was a shiny metal. And so I'm sitting here and I'm scratching my head. Why did they make the decision to go with a gray? It definitely tones the figure down and makes it really stand apart from the other die-cast figures.
That's a bummer. Now,
Yeah.
I have seen on Instagram, Chris, I know you're on Instagram more than I am, but I feel like there's one of the prominent Iron Man collectors on Instagram that has actually weathered the Hulkbuster power pose here, and it actually looks pretty good.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about. He really went to town with this thing. I mean, top to bottom. Just
But didn't even do like a full repaint, but they actually made the helmet damage. I don't know if I'd go that extent, but it sounds like, Steve, this could definitely use almost a repaint, which stinks for something you're paying that much for.
Yeah, I don't want to say $430 is cheap, but if you had if you wanted to take the risk to weather a figure and you had a choice between an $1,100 die-cast one or a $400 vinyl one, yeah, it makes more sense to weather it. Whether the cheaper one, because it's the price of making a mistake is lower, right? So yeah, I've seen that picture. It looks phenomenal. And talking about weathering, you look at this figure. This one is pretty much weathered the way any other Iron Man figure has been weathered lately. They get the paint scratched off in various places throughout the figure, but for the most part, it's very minor weathering throughout.
So, do you think the fact that there's a lack of a Bruce Banner head sculpt that, do you think that could have put this figure over the edge if that helmet came off and you had a, shoulders up version of Banner there?
That would have been a fantastic accessory for this. It's very limited in the accessories. It comes with a couple of interchangeable hands. It doesn't come with a base or anything like that. And I could see it being real easy also to just make the upper part, of the torso interchangeable. You pull the thing out, and then you place in a helmet up Bruce Banner figure in there. That would, in my opinion, bring this figure much higher, and as I'll talk about a little bit later, much more in line with the price that they're asking for. Even though it's cheaper, it doesn't mean that it's a good value, right? So yeah, that would have been awesome, and it's such an easy thing for them to have done. They didn't do it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I feel like, we've only gotten the one banner from Avengers. I don't know. We asked for this stuff from Hot Toys. They give us these amazing things, but there's definitely room for improvement. But yeah, I kind of wish that they did have, shoulders up kind of banner that you pop open the chest and drop that in, and then close it back up, because you see him, he's got the helmet off. At the end of that movie, it would be great to have recreate that scene. But I mean.
Yeah, that maybe they would say, hey, it's too expensive to put a door on it, blah 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 blah. Fine, they don't even have to go that far, Chris. They could just basically make the whole like a plug, basically like a cork. You pull the whole thing off, the head and the upper collarbone off, and you plug in Bruce Banner instead. Could have done something like that. The lights are a bright, cool blue. This thing stands out apart from all the other Iron Man figures. I don't know why they went with a cool blue, but it looks weird next to all the other figures. So that to me is a negative. One of the biggest problems with this thing is it's got the waist. Imagine like he's got a really thick belt on, and the very top edge of the belt, you can see seam marks. All around his waist, you see mold marks, seam marks all throughout it. They've been painted over, but that screams to me lack of attention to detail and low quality. The feet, it's like they got to the toes and they gave up. I don't know what, they painted it. They kind of stopped with the detail when they got to the feet. And then finally, I would say, even though I was saying that $430 is a much better deal than $1,100 plus, $430 for this figure is not justified. I would say that this is probably more along the lines of a $200 or $250 figure. Definitely not worth what they charged it. But you're kind of left in a conundrum, and ultimately I would still recommend getting this figure because that Infinity War line, I feel that he's so essential that spending the extra money, even though the quality isn't quite there, it's almost like you have to do it to have the Hulkbuster in the mix of the characters.
What was shipping costs on this guy?
I think it was, don't quote me, but I think it was around $40, $50. It wasn't too bad. The original Hulkbuster was much more.
Yeah, so people got to factor that added cost in there too. And then if their state has sales tax, and then you're talking over $500. And yeah, that's surprising. I know some other people have talked about the price. If this was in the $200 to $250 range, it would be much more justified.
You got to think about when Hot Toys designs this, they don't have to worry about a head sculpt. That's a major part of the cost of the figures, and there is no head sculpt here. The articulation is extremely simple articulation, right? The normal costs that come with a Hot Toys figure, there's no accessories, clothes, soft goods, anything like that. You're basically talking about a bunch of vinyl pieces snapped together with a halfway decent paint job. So that's what I'm doing, the mental calculus to figure out what this should be priced at. And you're right. In the 200s seems more appropriate.
Do we think this is going to sit on Sideshow for a long, long time?
Oh man, I could not sit there looking at my Infinity War figures and seeing the big hole in my lineup. But maybe other folks, maybe they're not buying. Maybe they're buying 4 or 5 figures of their favorites, and it's okay. He's not as essential. But if you want the line, I think it's essential.
Fair enough, man. Yeah, I know I'm gonna have a hole in my Infinity War lineup, but I've just accepted that because my plan is to go a different route for Hulkbuster. So more to come.
Do it. All right, Steve, let's get to the review and kind of your final thoughts about this. Now, before we hit the record button, we were kind of joking because, as I mentioned, this is one of the highest honors that we can bestow on any Hot Toys figure is our 5-point rating system here. We all kind of came to the conclusion ahead of time, so I don't have to put Chris on the spot here. But Chris, what are we going with for the review that Steve will give?
We'll go with Severed Cull Obsidian Hands.
So morbid and gruesome around here. All right, Steve, have at it.
So I know I've been pretty harsh on this, but at the end of the day, that's because it's Hot Toys. And still at the end of the day, it's a Hot Toys. And I'm waffling, but I would say I'm going to be generous and I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. That's probably the lowest any figure's ever gotten so far on the podcast, but it's definitely a weak 3. You know, a C plus ish, a B minus, a C plus, maybe.
Yeah, no, but I think it's important. I mean, I will say that we do tend to be a little, as we've mentioned before, and as you know, as a listener and I'm part of the team, is we do tend to be a little biased towards the positive because these things cost a lot of money. We all work very hard to earn the money to buy them. We're not going to buy things that we aren't going to like or we don't think are going to be high quality. And I think that's why we hold Hot Toys to a very high standard. None of us either A, have the disposable income or even want to do this is like we just go out, buy the figures, review them, and then sell them. I don't think that's sometimes genuine. And I think that's why, you know, we joke about being positive about it, but I think it's fair. I mean, you know, I hate to dare say it's average, but you know, for $430, it's tough to say you're buying an average figure. I mean, people want it to be, if they're going to spend that much, they want it to be a 5 out of 5, but you know, I respect your opinion on that because you're not gonna just say it's better than it really is. I mean, and that in itself is a tough pill to swallow because you're the one that spent the money, not somebody else.
Yeah, you know, you said average, and I think you're being generous. When I look around my figures, I have maybe 85-ish or so at this point. I would say it is probably the lowest of all my figures. And of all the figures I've seen released recently, probably the one I would say it's most comparable to would be that Dusty Deadpool in terms of the disappointment and Hot Toys not living up to the quality that that we're used to getting out of Hot Toys. Again, we hold Hot Toys up to a very high standard because Hot Toys are the best out there and we've seen amazing work out of them. This is not amazing work. This is on the bottom of their work.
Chris, any other final thoughts?
No, I just, again, I'll reiterate that it's refreshing to get an opinion like this because it's just like we talk about. We buy the figures we like, and I kind of feel bad that it's not a 5 out of 5 for you, Steve. Maybe Hot Toys is learning a lesson from this. Who knows? The quality with the rest of their figures is just so high that maybe they rushed this one. I don't know. Maybe they just tried pumping it out to get something out. So hopefully with whatever power pose comes next, maybe we get an Endgame power pose something. It's a possibility. So I guess we can compare it to that. And anybody else that has any power pose Iron Man figures, let us know or post them on the group, express your feelings on them. Because, I look at the Mark 47 power pose and you get it for like $150. And I'm just curious I haven't seen or heard anybody talk about that as opposed to buying one for like $750 or $800 for the diecast one.
Or $1,000.
Or $1,000 or even more. But yeah, it's interesting. And it's good to get one of these power poses on here because it fits into this line, but it is just a little bit different, and it's good to get a different opinion on one of these guys.
Yeah, so. Two more quick thoughts. One, if I had to do it over again, I would, because I think he's that essential. And two, his power pose is probably better than any pose you could get the Age of Ultron Hulkbuster into. The legs, for example, are much more dynamically wide and all that. So the pose, I think the pose is great, and I would do it again. It's not Hot Toys quality.
All right, good stuff. And I want to just, before we get into our plug here, just personally thank Steve for joining the podcast. Second episode in a row, we've had another part of the team on, and I think it gives a lot more to the show than what Chris and I have been normally capable of. So, Steve, thank you. And I want to personally thank you for all the work you've done for Scavengers Assemble. I think it's a great format, and hopefully it just continues to grow from here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bryan, for having me on. It's been a lifelong ambition of mine to be on a podcast, and I'm finally there. So I couldn't think of a better one though than this. Thank you guys.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, it was great having you on. I really appreciate it. And I was just thinking back, to touch on the beginning of the episode. It was funny when Bryan and I started the group, we added our friends and stuff, and then we both get this member request, and it's like, hey man, do you know this guy Steven? And Bryan's like, no. He's like, do you know him? I'm like, no. And like, should we accept it? He did answer the question, so okay, I guess so.
He has a pulse. Congratulations, yes. You're in.
Somewhere Matt is cackling right now.
Yeah.
Interrupting Matt. That's forever his name now.
Yeah, I don't know how. I think I was just scrolling through Tashi Station or something, and I saw a post that said, "Hey, we're starting a new group," and I loved the idea of getting in the beginning of a new group. And I think, for the record, I think I was number 5. I actually went back to look to see, and I think it was number 5 getting in at the time. So
yeah, I think you were the first member that requested to come onto the group. So that's pretty awesome, man.
And we're glad to have you. And like I said, it's just we're gonna just keep growing from here, and really looking forward to where it can go. All right, so plug time. We have our website, sixscalescavengers.com. We have our checklist referenced in the show, where they are links to Sideshow. Those are not affiliate links. Those are just for us doing a good duty and directing you to where you need to go. We also have affiliate links to eBay whenever those coupons come up and drop. If you click through there, our podcast gets a few dollars back that we can put towards hosting fees. Now with more content, our costs are going to go up. So it definitely is a time where you can really help us out. We also have our TeePublic store. There was recently a sale there. Some really cool looking t-shirts that you can help rep and be one of those scavengers that we have in our group. We have a Facebook page. We're on Instagram. We are on YouTube, and that's one thing, Steve, you've been key on is getting the presence there. The subscribers are up. That's where the Hangout is. The podcast is now on there. We mentioned the group. We're at 99 members, and one more will put us at 100. That's a pretty cool accomplishment, if you ask me. Answer the questions. You're welcome, Matt. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, and sixscalescavengers.libsyn.com. You can grab that RSS feed and throw it into your podcast catcher of choice. A couple quick shout outs to our friends in the community. PJ, the Paradox Nerd, was a panelist on Scavengers Assemble number 3, did a great job. Check out his video reviews for hot toys and statues on YouTube. Our friends at the Collecting Weekly podcast, Zach, Dean, Jesse, Manny, do a really good job there. And finally, Tashi Station 16 to Full Scale Collectors, their Facebook group. John Martino and his team do great work there. Whew. All right, guys, I think that is going to put the end to the marathon episode here.
Another nice long conversation. I really enjoyed it. Glad to have Steve on board for Scavengers Assemble, potentially coming up soon for the next episode. Join the group. Keep those conversations going there. We'll see you next time.
All right, Chris, bring us home.
Excelsior.